He set his canteen cup at the PX window. The flag rope clicked coffee, lifting like a contrail at dawn. An officer scoffed and pressed the form back across the counter, calling his 4-month timeline fantasy. The date looked off by 1. He didn't argue. He lifted the dog tag from his collar and set a V-mail beside the blueprint light, skating the curve that meant less fight with air discipline over noise. Quiet men leave echoes too. Let me take you back gently to the mess hall. Steam curled off the mess hall coffee pot, thin as a contrail. The PX bell chirped once. He set his canteen cup down, soft metal, soft echo. 4 months, a young lieutenant smirked. You're building a fantasy, Mr. Hale. He smiled like a man measuring wind. Maybe. Laughter brushed the walls, not cruel, just practiced. He touched the cup's rim with 2 fingers, steadying the tremor that wasn't fear so much as focus. 4 months only, someone read from a note tacked above the PX window. Even the stamp thinks you're dreaming. He glanced at the stamp-bleached corners, blurred ink. Or it means what lasts is what's tested, he said. Tested by what? Wishes, the lieutenant asked, shifting his tray. Forks clinked, chairs scooted. The coffee pot hissed again. He didn't pick up a rifle. He picked up a memory, his father's dog tag, warm in his palm, a vow in nickel. Some designs begin as promises, he said. A mess sergeant with a chin scar leaned in. Promises don't fly, engineer. Budgets do. Budgets fly when drag falls. Mr. Hale answered. The rest is sanding. They laughed at his math until the radio went quiet. The lieutenant circled, curious now. 4 months, though. Where'd you even put a timeline like that? On the wall, Mr. Hale said, tapping the note, where pressure can see it. The PX bell chirped again. Someone folded a V-mail letter nearby. Paper whispered like dry leaves. He watched the fold settle, crease dead center, clean, efficient. Sir, the lieutenant said softer, we already have wings that work. Working isn't the same as finishing the job, Mr. Hale replied. Range without surrender, calm at speed. Calm, the sergeant snorted. In this place, Mr. Hale let the room speak around him. Trays, shoes, steam, a hymn, faint from the chapel corridor, like a remembered chord. He breathed once even. The cup steadied under his palm. Look, the lieutenant pressed, what makes you think your lines on paper beat what's already flying? They're not shots, he said. They're proof. 1,000 shots on paper, only each one a precise vow. Still sounds like fantasy, someone muttered. He angled the cup so the overhead lamp threw a reflection across the blueprint roll by his elbow, liquid light tracing a curve he'd been sanding in his head for months. Fantasy breaks when numbers hold, he said, and when the surface is smoother than anyone thinks possible. The lieutenant squinted at the cup's gleam sliding over pencil arcs. That curve. You keep moving the thick part back, don't you? Not back, Mr. Hale said. Forward in a way that feels like less. Less, the sergeant said. Less what? Less fight with the air. He paused, letting the phrase find its landing. Discipline beats drag. He wasn't chasing glory, he was lowering friction. From the PX window, a clerk waved a parcel slip red cross on the corner, ink still damp. Chaplain left this, the clerk called. Says it's encouragement. Mr. Hale did not reach for the parcel. He let the room see it first. Proof arrives early, he said, half to the lieutenant, half to the memory hanging warm in his fist. 4 months only, the young man repeated, but there was no smirk left in it. 4 months, Mr. Hale answered, and every day has edges to sand. The coffee pot hissed. The PX bell ticked once more. He lifted the cup, listening to the small ring it made against the table, clear, not loud, like a level found true. Somewhere a radio crackled static, shouldering through the hum, then a breath, then static swelled and cut to black. The next morning the drafting room felt smaller than the night before. Thin light pressed through canvas blinds, turning blueprints into pale ghosts. Lieutenant Merrill waited by the door, a folder under his arm. Mr. Hale, Regulation C-12 states no civilian proposal may proceed without a colonel's stamp. The engineer looked up from the half-drawn curve. The colonel's stamp weighs more than the airfoil. It's still the stamp that flies here. He stood, dog tag swinging against the edge of his collar. The motion made a bright click, half habit, half prayer. "I'm not asking for a flight," he said, "just a chance to let numbers breathe." Merrow hesitated. "Numbers don't salute." "No," Hale replied, "but they remember who did." Regulation pinned him in place. The phrase hung like chalk dust. He could almost feel the rulebook's spine pressing between his shoulder blades. He took a slow breath, counting 6 seconds and 7 out the rhythm that kept panic from invading precision. Behind him, the shadow of a guard tower line stretched across the table, cutting the blueprint in half. He adjusted the lamp to chase it off. The light refused to move. Merrow cleared his throat. "Sir, the committee's already chosen the P-47 template. Your outside protocol." Hale traced a finger along the paper's edge. "Outside is where lift begins. Don't make this difficult." "I won't," he said softly. "The air already does." The lieutenant exhaled. "You engineers talk like poets. I talk paperwork. They won't even read it. Then we'll file it under endurance. That's not a department. It will be once someone proves it exists." Merrow almost smiled, but duty snapped his jaw shut. "Sir, if I forward this, I sign off on a violation. Then call it an observation." He slid the dog tag across the table metal on paper silver line over blue lines. "This is my signature, my proof of service." Merrow looked at the tag. "That's not regulation either." "Neither is hope," Hale said. A pause. 3 seconds. The reflection of the lamp trembled in the tag's curve. Outside, a truck backfired a sound that once meant danger, now only punctuation. Fine, Merrow muttered. "But if they ask, I never saw it. You didn't." The officer reached for the door. His hand stopped halfway, shadow bisecting the light like a drawn verdict. "Why keep at this, Mr. Hale? After all that paperwork?" He smiled small. "Because drag never wins forever." He didn't resist the rule. He refined it. The door creaked open. Light flooded in, erasing the shadow, but not the weight it had left. For a moment, Hale stood alone, blueprint pinned by the same wind that carried the officer's footsteps away. He straightened the pages, aligning corners with ritual precision. The dog tag lay in the center, reflecting morning like a compass. He whispered to the empty room, "Every constraint is lift in disguise." Then he folded the plan, slid it beneath the regulation binder, and watched sunlight crawl across the floor until it met the line he'd drawn. The light door closed with a sigh, part metal, part mercy, and the scene held still for 3 heartbeats before cutting to black. The radio hummed low, a static heartbeat under the barracks roof. Each burst of signal thinned against the winter air like someone trying to remember the sound of wings. Mr. Hale sat by the drafting table, tracing old lines with the stub of a pencil. Yesterday's dust had settled on the blueprints, tiny white flecks like snow he hadn't seen in 3 years. A knock. Then the slow creak of the door. "Mind if I come in, son?" The chaplain's voice carried coffee and frost. "Only if you brought forgiveness," Hale said without looking up. Reed chuckled. "Close enough." "I brought letters." He held up a Red Cross pouch tied with frayed string. The scent of paper and ink filled the cold air. "V-mail delivery," Reed said. "Straight from England. Pilots over Europe. Some of your old designs are keeping them warm." Hale stood brushing graphite from his sleeve. "Designs don't keep anyone warm." "Faith does," the chaplain said. "And these boys wrote with plenty of it." He spread the thin sheets across the table. The pages were translucent type, fading where the carbon hadn't pressed hard enough. One letter began, "Dear ground crew, you built what we trusted." Another, "Tell the quiet engineer the wings don't shake anymore." Hale's hand trembled once, then steadied on the paper. He whispered, "They made it past Calais." Some, Reed said gently. "Some sent these before they flew." A long pause. The radio hummed again, a steady low C that filled the space between words. Hale turned one letter toward the light, reading through both sides at once. "I forgot how thin paper can be," he murmured. "It's thin enough for faith to pass through," the chaplain said, "and strong enough to outlast protocol." Hale smiled. "Protocol doesn't fold this neatly." Reed grinned back. "I'll put that in my sermon." They both laughed, quiet and brief, the kind that sounded like breathing again after holding air too long. "Sometimes the loudest gratitude arrives as silence," Reed said. Hale touched the word home, printed near the bottom of one page. He stopped there, just a fingertip, just a pause. The chapel bell rang outside, dull through snow cloud. For a second he imagined that sound carried the letters upward, each tone another proof that what they built still flew. Reed began to gather the sheets, stacking them with ritual care. "Keep one," he said. "They told me to give you the first draft, said you'd know which line to finish." Hale took it, folded it twice, then, once more, smaller than before. He slipped it into his breast pocket beside the dog tag. "That's 2 weights of faith," he said. Reed nodded. "And neither one rusts easy." The chaplain turned to leave. "The committee's meeting again tomorrow. If they ask why you're still drawing, tell them the letters approved it. I'll tell them the wind did." He looked down at the table. Blueprint, dog tag, V-mail. The triangle of trust finally visible. The hum from the radio wavered, then steadied again, like breath returning after a prayer that had been half-finished too long. Outside footsteps faded down the corridor. Inside he whispered to the folded letter, "They still believed. So will I." Light pooled on the paper's edge. For a moment nothing moved but the ink drying into silence. Rain had returned before dawn, thin as static stippling the tin roof of the hangar. Mr. Hale wiped a sleeve across the window and watched the rivulets split like veins across glass. The blueprint lay beneath the lamp, creased, smudged, lived in. The lieutenant stepped in water trailing from his coat. "Colonel signed the order," he said. "They're shipping one of the British Merlins for your test frame." Hale didn't move at first. "They called it a transplant, didn't they?" Merrow nodded. "Said it's easier to replace a heart than change a doctrine." He didn't change an engine, he transplanted a promise. The phrase would echo later, but now it only sat between them, faint and trembling like the bulb above. "Regulations still watching?" Hale asked. "Always. But the colonel wants proof, not permission." He smiled, a slow, weathered smile that carried both fear and gratitude. "Then let's build with both." They rolled the fuselage out under the skylight. Rain light rippled across aluminum skin. Every drip became percussion, every breath a measure of risk. Hale's fingers trembled once as he fastened the new mount. The old engine block rested beside them like a spent lung, heavy, necessary, exhausted. Merrow unfolded a cloth patch from his pocket, the faded crest of the unit, a circle stitched around a small pair of wings. He said, "You'd want this back where it started." Hale took it carefully. This was on the first prototype. They pulled it off when the numbers failed. "Maybe it's time to sew it to something that works," Merrow said. The rain thickened, drumming faster. Hale lifted the patch toward the lamp. Its thread glowed like blood under glass. He pinned it to the frame just above the manifold. The dog tag slipped from his collar and swung beneath the light silver on steel, 2 pendulums marking faith and proof. "Looks like a chapel lantern," the chaplain murmured, entering quietly. "Mind if I bless the noise before it begins?" "Noise needs direction," Hale said. Reed placed a palm on the cowling. "Then may this heart turn discipline into lift." Outside the storm answered with a clap of thunder, distant but deliberate. Inside the crew held their breaths. Hale twisted the primer valve. Fuel hissed like a whispered secret. "Contact," he said. The propeller spun once, twice caught, and the hangar filled with sound. Not roar, not violence. A pulse. Merrow shouted over it. "Oil pressure steady." Reed leaned close to the vibration. "That's not an engine. That's a psalm." Hale smiled without looking up. "Every cylinder sings its own redemption." He rebuilt the air around him. Steam drifted toward the rafters, painting the ceiling with breath. The smell of rain and fuel braided into something holy. Merrow pointed to the gauge. "She's holding above spec." "How less fight with the air?" Hale said. I listened. "To what?" "To everything that resisted." The chaplain laughed. Then resistance did its job. The 3 men stood in the glow-rain percussion blending with the steady beat of the Merlin. The lamp flickered, casting the dog tag's reflection across the wet floor, a line of light that reached the blueprint pinned under a wrench. Hale bent, tore the blueprint's corner clean and pressed it against the tag, the paper trembling in the slipstream. "This is transfer," he said. "Old heart to new frame, service to silence." "Will it hold?" Merrow asked. "It already does," Hale replied. "Just needs someone to believe what can't be measured." Reed raised his voice as thunder rolled again. "Then take it to the choir." From outside, the base chapel choir began its morning hymn notes, rising with the engine's rhythm, harmony welded to machinery. Rain struck the roof in counter-tempo. Sparks of water ran down the window like Morse code. Hale rested both hands on the running engine, feeling its vibration travel through bone to memory. The dog tag clinked softly, keeping time. He whispered, "That's the sound of a promise breathing." Merrow reached for the power lever, but Hale stopped him with a glance. "Let it idle," he said. "Even miracles need cool down." They stood there until the hymn faded and the prop slowed. The last turn echoed like a long exhale, leaving only rain and the faint hum of instruments still alive. The lamp's circle shrank around the tag and patch symbols aligned. Transfer complete. Cut to black. The rain had passed by morning, leaving the mess hall washed in a thin silver quiet. Coffee hissed on the hot plate chairs, scraped, and someone turned the radio knob until the static thinned into a human voice. "This is London. Reports confirm the new Mustangs crossed deep over Germany. Escort complete. Every bomber returned." The sentence hung there like incense. Even the spoons stopped moving. Mr. Hale looked up from his tray. The lieutenant stood frozen beside the PX window, one hand on the glass as if to steady the whole world. "Did you hear that?" Merrow asked. "I did. Your curve flew." Hale smiled faintly. "No. Their faith did." Reed the chaplain arrived half a step behind the echo, carrying a newspaper still damp from rain. "You might want to frame this one," he said. The headline blurred, but the words "unshakable wings" were legible enough. "London's calling us heroes now," Merrow said. "But we're still on breakfast duty." "Justice doesn't need parades," Reed replied. "It just needs to be heard once." The PX bell rang a single clean note that traveled farther than applause. No one cheered, they just stood taller. Hale lifted his canteen cup. Steam curled upward, tracing the same rhythm as that bell. The same cup that once carried laughter now reflected a kind of silence that held gratitude without noise. Merrow exhaled. "Colonel sent a memo. Says the blueprints to be archived classified under field adaptation." "Filed or forgotten?" Hale asked. "Filed, sir." "Under your name." He paused, hand tightening around the cup. Then the air finally remembered. Reed set the paper down on the table. "Funny thing about memory, it always travels the same route as mercy." Hale nodded slowly. "Both take time to arrive." The mess sergeant leaned from the counter. "That new engine, they say it sips fuel, hums quiet." "You really did that?" "I listened to the wind," Hale said. "And the wind forgave me." Laughter rippled, once soft and real this time. It faded quickly, but not before leaving warmth behind. From the open door, sunlight slid across the floor until it found the cup. He raised it slightly, not as a toast, but as acknowledgment to the men in the air, to the silence that followed. Reed whispered, "You could preach with that gesture." "Better not," Hale said. "It's already scripture." Outside, boots scuffed gravel, the kind of sound that meant work was beginning again. No banners, no brass, just motion renewed. Merrow folded the newspaper, tucked it under his arm. "I suppose you'll want your table back in the drafting room." "No," Hale said, eyes on the window where sunlight now fell full. "Leave it here. Some ideas belong among the noise of breakfast." The PX bell chimed again almost on cue, and the radio voice repeated the headline for late listeners. Every man looked up, not to cheer, but to breathe deeper. Hale set the cup down carefully, its echo small but certain. Justice arrived in silence, and the silence stayed. Snow fell like quiet punctuation, soft, exact, unhurried. The war had ended 2 winters ago, but the town still carried its echo in small ways, the hum of the library radiator, the brass bell over the PX door, now tarnished to amber. Inside the new memorial wing, a glass case waited beneath the skylight. A small plaque read, "Winter of Peace, 1945. For those who kept the air smooth." The librarian brushed dust from the glass and stepped aside as Chaplain Reed entered, his overcoat dusted white. "You finished it," he said. "Finished or finally quiet?" she asked. Reed smiled. "Same thing sometimes." He looked down through the glass. Beneath it lay a canteen cup and a single dog tag arranged so the tag's chain curved like a horizon. The metal caught morning light, trembling just enough to mimic breath. "He said he wanted them close together," the librarian murmured. Reed nodded. "Tools of patience," he said. "One for thirst, one for service." A faint static filtered from the radio on the counter. the same model that had once announced the Mustang's return. Its voice replayed a fragment of that broadcast, crackling through time. All aircraft home, all hearts steady. The librarian folded her hands. Do you think he ever heard that message live? He didn't need to, Reed answered. He built it. They stood in the hush that followed the radiator, sighing like wind through wings. Snow tapped the windows in measured rhythm, each flake erasing a little of the world's noise. Children's laughter echoed from the reading room, distant light impossible to time. Reed looked up at the inscription above the doorway. Quiet Courage Library. Established by Veterans Council. You know, he said he used to joke that drag was just the world arguing with progress. She smiled. Did he ever win the argument? He made it fair, Reed said. A shaft of pale light struck the plaque bright enough to read the smaller line beneath. He leaned closer, lips moving with the engraving. He kept the air smooth for those who came after. The librarian whispered, "Replay trigger achieved." Reed chuckled softly, though he didn't know why it felt like ceremony. He'd have called that line a clearance report. Snow gathered heavier now, muting the footsteps outside. The radio hummed once more, not static this time, but music the chapel choir recording from that rain-filled morning. The melody rose, folded back into itself, and faded under the hiss of snowfall. Reed touched the glass fingers, leaving no print. "Rest easy, engineer," he said. "The air is holding." He turned off the radio, letting the silence reclaim its own pitch. The bell above the door gave one faint ring. Community Echo number 2, and the scene closed on the reflection of light over the cup and tag, two quiet proofs of service enduring past sound. Cut to white. The library lights dimmed to evening gold, and soft snow pressed against the windows like unspoken applause. Under glass, his canteen cup caught the last choir note from the chapel across the square. A canteen cup catching choir light. The steady glow of patience turned to proof. No speeches, no parade. Just the murmur of visitors reading his plaque aloud, their breath clouding the glass as if returning warmth to metal. He'd once said progress was only air made smoother, and now even the silence obeyed that rule. He kept the air smooth for those who came after. Outside, the radio replayed the broadcast of All Hearts Steady, and somewhere in that echo the world stood taller, quiet enough for gratitude to be heard.